When growth stalls, most leaders reach for surface fixes like new campaigns, a sharper sales deck, even new hires. But the real issues are often deeper, such as misaligned systems, broken handoffs, or unreliable data. That's why we built the Growth Readiness Score. In just 5 minutes, you'll get a clear score across 4 critical areas of your revenue operations and see how you stack up against your peers with benchmark data. Tap the link in the show notes to get started. It's quick, insightful, and often reveals issues leaders don't expect.
Attribution is about clarity, not credit, because it should really be something that you are using to guide decision-making, not assign credit to a department or to even a campaign for that amount of revenue. It's an imperfect system, but it's one that can help you make more informed decisions.
You're listening to RevOps Champions, a podcast created for B2B leaders to help you align your people, streamline your processes, trust your data, and leverage technology in order to grow your business. Welcome back to the RevOps Champions podcast. Today's guest is Ryan Gunn, a B2B marketing and revenue operations leader and the founder and chief education officer of Attribution Academy. Ryan has spent more than a decade helping companies connect marketing activity to real revenue outcomes through better attribution, clean data, and HubSpot strategy. He has led demand generation and marketing operations for high-growth companies and HubSpot elite partners, built practical attribution frameworks, and is the co-host of the Partner Playbook podcast. Ryan is widely known for helping teams align marketing and sales around revenue and making smarter decisions with data. Ryan, welcome to the RevOps Champions podcast.
Thank you so much. This is exciting.
Yeah, looking forward to diving in with you. This is long overdue.
Yeah, I got the recommendation that I should reach out to you, checked out some of your back catalog, and I was like, how have I not met this guy yet?
Yeah, it is crazy how you and I have just sort of been like ships passing in the night for, I don't know, it feels like at least 4 or 5 years.
Yeah,
so good to be here. Yeah. Fine. What originally made you realize that marketing and sales alignment was a bigger problem than tools or tactics?
Yeah, I have worked, like you said, I've been in marketing for 10 plus years, and I've always had close relationships with sales. I'd say early in my career, I learned quickly that was very important, and that if you didn't have close marketing sales alignment, then marketing was the one that suffered for it. So being on that side of it, it really opened my eyes. Like some of the early companies I worked for just didn't have that closeness. We were doing a lot on the marketing side, driving a lot of kind of vanity metrics, website visitors, downloads of ebooks and stuff like that, and just weren't seeing it converting on the sales side. And
Right.
A big part of that is we just had totally separate processes. Like there was no structured handoff. There was no closing of the loop. So things kind of just like dropped off of a cliff after marketing, and then sales would catch a few here and there, but mostly they were just doing their own thing, and that had worked for them for years. But in order to like scale quickly, you need both to work together. After those experiences, I became much more intentional about creating those relationships and building those processes that connect the two. And it's been much more successful that way, as I'm sure you can imagine.
Yes. We've been dealing with this ourselves for, I guess, around 12 years now. There are certain things that you just cannot overcome when a business who is a client in our case, if they have a culture of marketing is kind of the sort of the stepchild or whatever, where it's what is marketing doing to serve sales versus marketing and sales working together. It's really hard to break that. And if you've experienced that, what has been successful in that type of situation?
That is one of the more difficult situations. Like you said, it's if marketing is kind of reporting up through sales, or if it's seen as like just sales enablement, that is a culture problem. It is less about like process and more about how are these two teams positioned to work together or like against each other. Oftentimes, you have to push back. And if you don't have the authority to do that, then your ability to make that change and create that alignment is really limited. And it really comes down to to leadership decisions. So I worked for a company. They had been in operation for about 15 years prior to me getting there. They brought me on to start a marketing program for them. And they had been doing really well with like word of mouth and inbound referrals and their sales-led motion. They had like dominated the category that they were in, but they were looking to expand into another sector where they didn't have those relationships. So that's where marketing comes in handy. But the sales team had some of them had been there since the beginning for 15 years. So they had a way of doing things that they liked. They weren't too eager to change that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was reporting up through sales. So there was not a ton that I was able to do, but I did sit down with the CEO and I outlined that problem that I was seeing, that the sales team right now is not open to changing and adopting new ways of doing things in order for us to expand into the new sector. Fortunately for me, I had a close relationship with the CEO and he took that feedback seriously. And there were some pretty big changes on the sales side. But what it started with, which I think other companies could replicate and can be very successful, is doing a pilot, finding one sales rep who is down to play ball with marketing and creating a really close relationship with just that one rep. And very quickly, if marketing is doing its job well, you can start to see in the reporting that rep is closing deals faster. They're closing more deals. Their time between, when something hits marketing and when it becomes a customer is sped up. And that their pipeline is bigger than everybody else's and their commissions are bigger than everybody else's. And suddenly the motivation to work with marketing is a lot more attractive than if you just have all of sales kind of doing their thing the same way they always have. And you present this idea of like, don't you guys want to work with marketing? It's very different once it's actually proven to work.
Yeah. I guess that's been our experience too. Those pilots are very, very effective, especially when you started by saying, if you like, let's just say there are 12 reps or 15 reps, and you're saying, well, we're just looking for 2 volunteers. That already gets the sort of competitive juices flowing, right? And all you need, like to your point, is 1 or 2 to go, sure, yeah, I'll do it. And then everyone else is watching them to see what happens, right?
Yeah, competitive is a good word because salespeople are naturally competitive. They're in that role for a reason. And that's a very good way of thinking about it. It's like, how do I incentivize that competitive spirit to work in favor of the teams working together?
Right. Yeah, and I guess this is probably sort of this has been an issue forever, right? The misalignment between sales and marketing teams has been going on forever. Fortunately, it seems to be heading in the right direction and has been now for a few years. But that was also like starting with SaaS, most I guess SaaS and technology first. This is where sort of RevOps was born when I think in companies where they saw the benefits of the alignment between marketing and sales and then later customer service, they realized that, having one support function, being RevOps essentially for all 3 teams versus, marketing ops just working with marketing and sales ops just working with sales and service ops, et cetera. It's been interesting to see, again, the benefits of companies who've adopted that model, whether they call it RevOps or not, but just aligning their customer facing or their revenue teams is, again, it's incredibly powerful, but at the same time, it's amazing to see how many companies are being relatively successful without doing that, but knowing how much money they're leaving on the table by not doing that. What have you? I mean, how do you think about? Because I know one of the things you're very passionate about is aligning any activity, whether it's marketing or sales, with how it drives revenue. Like when was an instance in the beginning that you realized? I mean, you started touching on this now, where if you were working with marketing working with one rep as a pilot and they start seeing results, I mean, that's a pretty good example. But then how do you sort of roll it out to the organization in a more meaningful way so that it becomes sort of part of the everyday practice?
Yeah, it comes down to it's how the organization thinks about marketing is how they're contributing to revenue. And most of the time, if you can't measure it, then marketing is looked at as a cost center. And what that means is that when it's time to reallocate budgets, marketing gets the short end of the stick. And that can be very detrimental long-term to pipeline, to sales. And you don't necessarily see what those effects will be because you don't have the reporting to show marketing activity is actually contributing meaningfully to pipeline, to revenue, to how quickly sales can close a deal.
Right.
So it's kind of a chicken and the egg scenario where you need the reporting in order to prove that marketing can do it, but you need resources in order to build the system that will prove it. And you can't get the resources if you don't have the budget, and you've lost the budget because you couldn't measure it in the first place. So at some point, you just need to like bite the bullet and make the decision and say, marketing's going to be a little bit less productive while we're building this, or better option, have a RevOps team. RevOps can lead the charge in building that attribution and creating that alignment between the teams where everybody realizes this is important. And, we know that marketing is being successful. We just need to show it.
Yeah. Just one more sort of question on this. Can you tell us the story of when misaligned goals between marketing and sales created real tension or unintended consequences?
Yeah, I have a great example of this. I was working for a company where we were trying to move our business up market. We were going after bigger customers, bigger deal sizes, and we had always kind of based marketing's goals around MQLs, the kind of industry standard that everybody hates, but we all put up with. So we would always just do the math where we would say, this is our revenue goal. This is the number of deals we need to hit that based on our average deal size. This is the number of leads we need to hit based on conversion rates. And you get to a number of MQLs that you need to hit that you anticipate will help you reach your revenue goal. The problem with that in our situation was the company was actively pursuing bigger deals, bigger companies. So that average deal size we expected to change. If we're doing things right, that average deal size is going to grow.
Right.
And I argued very, very hard that marketing should be held to a dollars of pipeline generated metric instead of MQLs, because I thought it was more aligned with this goal to move up market. The CEO I was working with he was new at the company. He had just taken over from another CEO. So I'm sure he was dealing with like tons of change all over the place. And maybe this was an area that, could stay the same and lower the amount of stuff that he was having to deal with that was changing. But for whatever reason it was, we ended up going with the MQL number. Now, throughout that quarter, we ended up being very successful at this shift up market. So we were actively, pursuing marketing strategies that were designed to attract these bigger deals. We ended up blowing our revenue number out of the water. The bad news there was that our average deal size went up 8 times what it was at the beginning of the quarter. And I missed my MQL goal by a mile because we needed fewer MQLs in order for the conversion rates to work out to hit the revenue goal. So I missed that out. I didn't end up getting my bonus that quarter, but I stand by the decision to, do the marketing strategies that would attract the bigger deals, because I think there are probably marketers out there who would have taken a different route and said, well, I can hit that MQL number, and pursued strategies that would have attracted smaller deal size, but larger volume of leads. And that wasn't aligned with overall company goals. So I'm happy that we ended up doing it. It ended up working really well, but there was definitely some tension come bonus time when I felt like I had done everything right, and that just wasn't reflected in how the goals were set.
It sounds like you, even though you agreed to the MQLs being the measurement, you were actually doing dollars of pipeline generated.
Yeah, I was definitely like leading the marketing team in a way that was aligned with revenue and pipeline and dollars rather than volume of leads.
Yeah. So you were doing what you thought was the right thing for the company, even though you knew that you weren't being incentivized that way. You were doing it because you knew it was the right thing to do.
Yes, correct.
Yeah. I mean, it's an awesome story. I'm sorry you didn't get your bonus that time, but I'm sure there were some good lessons learned, and you proved your theory.
I did. After that, we implemented a dollars of pipeline goal for the next quarter. So it won out.
There you Awesome. That's a great story. Ryan, what changed for you when you saw revenue grow, even though traditional marketing metrics like MQLs were missed?
It really just made me feel like I kind of felt for my whole career that I knew that marketing was bigger than these. I feel like historically marketing has been held to a lot of vanity metrics. And it's when you do that, you're measuring activity, not impact. And you need marketing and sales and customer success to be aligned under a unified goal. And I think that goal is revenue. It should touch everything that you're doing. You're bringing in more leads because those leads, you want them to turn into dollars. So why are we putting this middleman in there and relying on conversion rates? And then on the services side, you're talking about retention, reducing churn, upselling. All of that stuff is tied to revenue. It's keeping revenue, it is growing revenue. And somehow, at some point, companies decided that sales was the only department responsible for revenue. And I'm happy to see that expanding. And we're seeing, the entire go-to-market team be brought under some unified goals. And I think part of that is systems are being unified. It used to be that marketing uses HubSpot, sales uses Salesforce, service uses Zendesk, and we're seeing more and more platforms support multiple teams. Salesforce has been doing it for years. HubSpot now has really robust support for sales and service. I'm even seeing finance teams and people ops start to do more stuff inside of HubSpot. So that helps unify teams. It becomes cultural when you're all working on the same platforms and you don't feel so siloed because you can see what other people are doing as well.
Yeah. And I guess, and really what you're talking about is just a level of sophistication of a business, right? Because I know as we work with larger and larger companies, even the pipeline as a metric starts to become less important, and net revenue retention, NRR, becomes the new metric, right? Again, to your point, because now the entire revenue or go-to-market team is working towards what is driving overall value of the company. I mean, it is revenue, but you get to a certain point where it's no longer just revenue; it's actual what are we doing to increase the value of the company? But which of course you cannot do without revenue. But it's interesting to see that these are all sort of signals of the level of sophistication of ultimately the leadership team of that business. And eventually they realize, when they start hitting their head against that ceiling, they realize that there's something that needs to shift. In many cases, of course, they don't know what it is. But eventually, when they figure it out, there is this kind of trend of what decisions they're making when they hit that particular ceiling.
Yeah, it's not just how many things did we sell. It becomes, is that sustainable and scalable?
Right.
And you see a lot of companies trying to make that transition from transactional sales to more of a recurring subscription or some kind of recurring revenue model.
Right. And also, I guess when you sort of started touching on when you flip that funnel, you sort of create that bow tie funnel where again the whole go-to-market team, from marketing, sales, and now customer service, is there to really retain the customers that you already have, because they are the best customers because you already have them, and they're a lot less expensive to find because they're already there. So yeah, and again, it's just interesting to see how certain leadership teams it takes them a little longer to see the value of making that investment, and it sort of ultimately it seems to come down to a lack of creativity, right? Or I guess the other side of that coin is they're not wanting to take the risk of doing things differently because of what the consequences might be.
I think risk is definitely a huge part of that.
Right. Yeah.
It's interesting because when you have the hindsight to say it was successful, it seems so obvious. But certainly when I joined that company that had been around 15 years, I'm sure hiring a person to start a marketing department felt like that's a lot of budget. That's a big risk. You're hiring a marketer instead of another sales rep. And, instead of buying a Rolodex of of, a sales rep who already had experience in that sector they were trying to break into. They hired a marketer. And that has to feel risky at the time. And thankfully it paid off.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess what we're starting to touch on here is attribution. In other words, what drives revenue and what drives value. So Ryan, how do you help teams reframe attribution so it supports alignment instead of becoming another source of conflict?
That's such a great question. I think there's a fundamental mistake that a lot of companies make when they're thinking about attribution, which is a lot of them are looking at it as a scoreboard. Like they want to see this number of deals marketing is responsible for, this number of deals sales is responsible for.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately that creates division. You create this infighting where marketing and sales are starting to have arguments over like, well, this person visited the website way before you first talked to them, but you didn't associate them to the deal, so we didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
And it creates a division between the teams that I think can be really detrimental to the ultimate goal of attribution, which is getting everybody on the same page. So I like to say that attribution is about clarity, not credit, because it should really be something that you are using to guide decision making, not assign credit to a department or to even a campaign for that amount of revenue. It's an imperfect system, but it's one that can help you make more informed decisions. And ultimately, that is what you're looking for. You just want to understand, how can we best allocate our budget? How can we change up our channel mix to better serve the overall revenue number?
Yeah, it's almost like, again, this is how bad this misalignment between sales and marketing has always been, or has been for too long, until a lot of companies started realizing or saw the light of working together. It's almost it reminds me of negotiation. It's almost like we're negotiating. Sales is negotiating with marketing, and vice versa on who should be credited for that particular revenue flow, right? Whereas one of the best, I've read a few books on negotiation. One of them by Chris Voss's, Never Split the Difference, which should not be about marketing and sales. But as I think about it, it's so, one of the things that they talk about in negotiation is like, if you are starting a negotiation feeling like you have two parties sitting on opposite sides of the same table, you're already off to a bad start. It's how do you move around the table and go and sit next to them and figure out, how do we kind of win together, which is essentially what marketing and sales in this case should do is come and sit next to me and say, well, look what we did. Like, that person, saw that content, or they had that conversation, or they downloaded this particular thing or whatever. It's like we did that together, not like, I should take credit for that and you should take credit for that.
I would love it if when sales saw a lead come from marketing, instead of thinking like, oh man, there's like a 50-50 chance this is not a fit. If instead they were like, oh man, this person has looked at some of our marketing. I can see what they've looked at. That tells me something about what they're interested in. And I can make more informed outreach and design the rest of the sales process around what I know about them, and make it a more personalized interaction.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of, I think because of the explosion of inbound marketing in the 2010s, a lot of salespeople think the first way, where they aren't sure if it's a waste of their time or not. And there's certainly some stuff that marketing needs to do to repair that relationship as well, and better understand the ICP and what makes a good deal, and how marketing can better qualify before handing off to sales.
Yeah. Which ultimately, again, it comes back to leadership, right?
Yes.
I mean, I know you and I haven't really talked about how we define RevOps differently, but or how it's the same, I guess. But so the four pillars that we talk about are people, process, data, and technology. And the people component is absolutely foundational. And we've already touched on it a couple of times, like this, having a culture of sales and marketing and service working together versus in a siloed way. But it really, I mean, the first component of the first piece of the people component is leadership. Leadership has to see and simplify, and for their teams to be successful, they need to remove complexity instead of watching it happen in front of them like it's some sort of a game. And that's something that they like to talk about every week. The friction between sales and marketing, and instead of sort of the nirvana of them actually working together. Right?
Yeah, I love that people is the first pillar in RevOps that you mentioned. I think that's 100% true. And I can tell you from experience, I've worked with leaders, CEOs who understand the art versus the science of marketing, versus those who don't. And it makes an enormous difference. Like when I was working at Aptitude 8 under Connor Jeffers, Connor was like a firm believer in there are parts of marketing, I don't care how good our attribution is, that we're not going to be able to measure. And we just kind of have to go off of gut feel on, is this the right move or not? And is this the right use of our budget or not? And that's a hump I think a lot of companies struggle to get over. But what happens when you do give marketing that agency, that autonomy, is you can test things. You have the ability to, fail fast, but then do stuff that you've tested from experience and you've shown that it works and you can replicate. And that's such a huge advantage over companies that optimize for what's easy to measure versus what actually works. And I see that all the time where companies say, we can see the results of lead gen, so we're going to do more lead gen and not focus at all on branding. Branding is so hard to tie to revenue.
Yeah. Well, and actually, as you were talking, it reminded me whether it was Connor or any other leader who had to make a call on the sort of the glass being half full or the glass being half empty, which goes back to Peter Drucker when he said, "We know that half of our marketing is working, we're just not quite sure which half."
Yeah.
But that takes a leader to say that's just the way it is.
Well, I can tell you that at Aptitude 8, we saw the results of that, not through traditional attribution reporting, but just in like the conversations we would have with customers. This actually became a lot easier once we implemented AI note takers and we were seeing transcripts of stuff, and marketing can go into a sales call and actually review what was said, rather than just like having to either be invited, which salespeople don't want you to jump in on their sales calls. So that became a lot easier. But what we were seeing is that people were actually talking about our brand and our reputation as a partner. And that's not stuff you're going to get in your attribution report, is those kind of intangible marketing soft skills, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely right. So Ryan, for leaders listening who feel overwhelmed, which of course is happening quite a bit right now, there's always some version of it, but right now seems to be a little more than the normal. What does a practical, realistic attribution setup actually look like at different stages of growth?
It's going to look very different at pretty much every company, but there's kind of a guiding principle that I have, which is to build the attribution model that you have the resources to support. You kind of need the minimum viable version of it. Early in my career, I had this idea that everybody should be striving for this perfect multi-touch attribution where you are seeing like a literal map of the customer journey and you can see every stop along the way. And frankly, it's a pipe dream. It's impossible. There's so much that happens in the customer journey that is not measurable and will never be measurable. Rather than spending a ton of time and resources building a multi-touch attribution system that's really complex and captures as much as possible, I'd go for like, how many people do you have on your team? How much time do you want them to dedicate to maintaining and following the processes that you have to follow in order to keep the data consistent? If you look at like using UTM tracking links, they are incredibly helpful. They can give you so much information, but what you need is consistent naming conventions. You need a place to store all of the links. You need to standardize the data structure for all of those different UTM parameters. And then you need your marketing team to consistently use those links in every single place they post 100% of the time. And that's such an enormous process lift. It usually is not like it, unless you have really strict checks on your process and adherence. It's something that quickly falls through the cracks. And really what most companies need is just like some simple level of influence tracking, not even pure attribution where you're, like I cautioned against before, where you're assigning credit to a specific campaign, or I've seen companies go down to like an individual ad and trying to assign an amount of revenue to that one piece of creative. You just need to understand like how much of our revenue passed through LinkedIn as a channel, or something along those lines, where you're seeing is this actually working at some point in the funnel, and you can figure out where in the funnel that's working, and that can help you. You can get more granular than channel and do specific campaigns, but ultimately, I think what you're looking for is just like, is what we are doing working? Is it influencing revenue in a positive way? And that's not as hard as something like multi-touch. And you can do it with a lot fewer resources, and it's easier for your team to maintain.
Right. You've created, well, your attribution mastery certification is something that you've created, which people can actually use to figure this out in more detail. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's something that it launched in November of last year. So it's been around about
like 3
3 months now. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
We've got over 200 students have enrolled in it,
Nice.
which blew my expectations out of the water. But it is designed to kind of take somebody from knowing the ins and outs of HubSpot into specifically how do you develop an attribution system. And that system's not just the workflows and the custom properties and how you make it function. It's everything from how do you talk about it with sales and leadership, to how do you report on it, to how do you make decisions based on the data that you've collected, and trying to hit all of those pillars that you talked about before. We want to make sure that it's not just a technical process, it's a people process, and that it is informing your strategy. It's enabled by technology. Technology isn't defining how you're doing it, it's supporting it.
Right. Okay. And how big a lift is that for people who are interested in doing that mastery certification?
It'll take about 3 to 4 hours to complete. There's 5 modules. I've seen people go through it quicker. You can set 1.25 times speed or whatever.
Sure.
But I would say for your average student, it probably takes 3 to 4 hours. And hopefully at the end of that, you walk away with a full framework. I've got a bunch of templates and outlines and resources that students can take away to actually implement it at their own company.
That's awesome. Thanks so much for doing that, Ryan. That's obviously going to be incredibly valuable to a lot of people who need to figure this out, whether they know that themselves or whether their company expects that. And where can people go to find that?
That's at attribution.academy. That's the website. And I would say if you're not quite ready to pull the trigger on buying a course, I also write a newsletter, which is at hubsest.io. I actually, prior to this, will be announced tomorrow as we're recording this, but should be done by the time it's released. I just acquired Stuart Balcomb's Connected GTM newsletter.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So now all of the content from both of those is in the same place. We've merged everything, and there's a lot of like years of really good content and resources there that you can subscribe to.
Which is free.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, cool. Great. I know we have a few minutes here before we wrap up. So, Ryan, how do you see alignment and attribution evolving as AI becomes more embedded in revenue teams and decision making?
This is a really interesting one. I've already seen it, and I've personally been experimenting with how to get AI involved in the process. I think we're going to see massive advancements in terms of how AI is able to analyze your CRM data and tell you what is and isn't working. But in the short term, kind of more tactical implementations of it, I've been doing a lot using the AI call transcripts as a way to grab unstructured information, using AI to standardize it, and then reporting on that for attribution. If you think about the "how did you hear about us" question that people put on demo forums and contact forums, it's like that on steroids. If you have close alignment with your sales team and you're able to get them to put into their discovery call playbook a question about "how did you hear about us?" or "what made you decide to reach out to sales," that can be enormously beneficial. You get the transcript, it shows up in HubSpot. You can use Breeze workflow action to filter through all of that data and find the answer to the question that you want, and find just little mentions of events or webinars or specific pieces of content, or just like what I would see a lot of is, because I'm so active on LinkedIn, just a lot of mentions of LinkedIn. in sales calls.
Mm-hmm.
And you can pull that out and say, LinkedIn influenced this deal. Even if we don't know that that was a first touch or a last touch or anything measurable,
Mm-hmm.
we know like, hey, I follow your CEO on LinkedIn. And that's really beneficial for being able to show how marketing is impacting how people are thinking, even if it's not a measurable touch point.
Yeah. And I know, I think we've already alluded to this once or twice on this recording, and we both seem to have the same view that technology is not the solution. Technology is what supports what you're building, right? But as a matter of interest for the folks listening, that particular example of the call recording software, so people are using a myriad of different tools, like we use Fathom, for example. And then of course, and HubSpot. Is there anything in between that you're using to do the sort of the AI piece of this?
I've started using an AI note taker called Ask Elephant that has a really robust HubSpot integration. The other great thing about it is, and it's been a while since I've used Fathom or any of the others, so maybe they've caught up with this. But certainly at the time when I started using Ask Elephant, they were the only one that I had tried that allowed you to chat with multiple meetings. So you could select, an entire call history with one sales prospect or one client. And then using, just a natural language interface like you would with ChatGPT, just ask it questions. And when you can do that with all active deals or all closed won deals, you can pull trends and information that you wouldn't be able to get by just, looking at a single call transcript or
Absolutely.
jumping in on a random call here and there and trying to ascertain what the patterns are. It really opened up a lot of opportunity there. And like I said, their HubSpot integration pushes a lot of that into HubSpot itself. So made it a lot easier.
Cool. Yeah. Well, thanks for mentioning that. Because, I've actually been checking that out, so I'll continue digging.
Yeah, they're good people over there. They've done a lot of really good work. I've done some partnership stuff with them as well, and they're just genuinely kind and
Good
cool
people.
people.
That's awesome. So Ryan, to wrap up, if a founder or revenue leader could take just one step this quarter to improve alignment and trust in their data, what would you recommend?
I'd recommend getting everybody on the same page when it comes to terminology definitions. I would bet that your marketing team and your sales team have different definitions of what the ICP is, different definitions of what qualifies as a sales qualified lead or an MQL. And I think just having everybody under a single umbrella with that stuff can be so hugely beneficial. It's going to unlock a lot for your marketing team specifically. Or definitely early in my career, I felt like I was kind of flying blind on a lot of that stuff and I was making a lot of assumptions or guesses. And once you dedicate time to putting everybody in a room together and aligning on that stuff, it clears everything up and it allows you to kind of sprint together instead of pulling in opposite directions.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one and a good one, because we're reminded all the time about how terminology becomes such an obstacle when people get used to using certain words that other people aren't familiar with. But you never put two and two together, that if we're speaking, it's essentially we're speaking a different language, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, you're saying something and they're hearing something else. Yeah, that is definitely the first step I would take. I mean, there are literally no limitations to that other than just, can you schedule everybody who needs to be in a meeting at the same time?
Yeah. Do you have any resource recommendations for folks to do that?
To get aligned on the same page?
Like to get aligned on the same terminology definitions.
Yeah, I don't know about resources. I mean, there's tons of content out there about different ways to structure that stuff and how you should be thinking about what qualifies as an MQL or what you should include in an ICP definition.
Right.
But I think what's more important is just to agree on it internally and then document it and make sure that documentation is in a place where it's accessible to everybody. It's new hires get it when they're brought on. If there are any disagreements, you can refer back to it. That's a really key piece to it that's deliverable after the meeting is putting that together.
Yeah. Very good. Ryan, any last words of advice before
Yeah, I think the one thing that we didn't talk about that I think is crucial to everything that we've talked about is data hygiene. It's a problem at every single company. I've never seen a HubSpot portal that doesn't have messy data, duplicate data. And I've been in a lot of them. I think like I have accounts in about 30 of them right now. It's always a problem. It's never going away, but it's something that you should prioritize, especially with AI becoming so much more important. AI doesn't know the difference between good and bad data, and it's garbage in, garbage out. So if it's trained on bad data, it's going to give you bad results.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Ryan, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was
Absolutely. Thanks again.